I'm Will, and this is a review video for the first midterm for CSCI 1300. This is question 16. This one is definitely trickier. It's much longer. There's a lot going on with all these functions, and it's really not obvious what this code does at first. But let's take a look at it. Let's try and break it down and see what we can see. It's always worth actually reading the question first. So question 16, given the following code, and then we give you a bunch of code, and then the question's in three parts, part A, part C. Part A says, what is printed when the input for X is -10 and the input for Y is 2? Part B also asks what is printed, but it's got different numbers, and part C also asks what is printed. Okay, so right away, I'm looking for prints. I'm looking for couts, right? That's the keyword that outputs stuff. Looking at the code, there's only one. It's at the end of main right here. So we just have to figure out what it actually prints. Let's take a closer look. So code always starts with the main function, right? That's where all code sort of begins. It does int x, it does int y, so these variables are being set up. And then we see them in, so cn, x, c, and y. Let's use part A for now. We'll look at part B and part C later. So for x, we do -10. And for y, we're going to do 2. Okay, what do we do with those? The only other line of code here is int result equals mystery function x comma y. So that's going to call the mystery function. The inputs are x and y, -10 and 2. And the output gets saved as this results variable. Now looking ahead here, I don't know how mystery function works. I don't know what it's going to do, but I do know that result is going to get printed. So I just got to figure out what mystery function returns, and that'll be the answer I put in the box. So let's take a look. Right off the gate, I look at mystery function, and there's no x's and y's. It's all a and b. But that's okay. Remember, in C++, all the inputs are based on their position. So if I do -10, comma 2, then up here, A is going to be -10, and B is going to be 2. Great. So what does mystery function do? There's a lot of if statements here, and it's easy to get pretty scrambled up. Let's try to make a flowchart to kind of see what's going on. So this first if statement, I'm just going to label 1. I'll label this one 2, 3, 4, and I'll throw in a 5 for our lone little bit of code down here. So the first thing that happens is this if statement 1. It might be true, it might be false. If it's true, what happens? Well, we go in these brackets and we do number 2. That one is also an if statement, so it could be true or false. If it's true, we just do this bit of code here. But if it's false, what happens? Remember, with if statements, if it's false, we skip over the code inside the brackets. So that skips over this code, but importantly, it doesn't run the rest of the code, right? This number 1 doesn't get to skip down to number 3 unless its parentheses are false. Look very carefully here. We have if, and then we have a bunch of stuff in parentheses, right? That's either going to be true or false. And only when it's false do I do else. It really is tricky. It seems like this else might connect to number 2, but it doesn't. This bracket here is this bracket here's partner. It connects back to number 1. So our flowchart looks like this. 3 is here, right? It can be true or false. If it's true, we have some code to run. And if it's false, we'll do number 4. It's the else. And it's got a bunch of code to run. But let's go back to number 2 here. What if 2 is false? Nothing happens. That's the end of this chunk of code, right? We're done with all the code in 2. We skipped it. It was false. And we're done with all the code in 1. 1. We've looked at all of it. So we're done. No matter what you do with these if statements, once it's all said and done, number 5 gets to run. So I might add another arrow here. Right? Everything comes back to number 5. But this is sort of the structure of the if statements. Okay, where were we? Right, -10 and 2. Let's start with that. If not is positive A and is positive B. Okay, there's a lot going on in that if statement already. Let's try to break it down one step at a time. So A is -10. Is that positive? Well, no, it's not. We can double check how is positive is defined up here, but it's just checking if it's bigger than 0. -10 is not bigger than 0, it's smaller. So that's false. So I might say that this says exclamation mark, false, and then I have the 2 ampersands. Okay, is positive B, B is 2, that one's true. You might need to double check your cheat sheet, but hopefully you remember the exclamation mark flips it. So really this says true, my double ampersand's true. And that's definitely going to be true. Okay, number 1 ended up being true, so we jumped down to number 2. If is positive A plus 10. Okay, A is -10. -10 plus 10 is 0. Is positive 0. That's false, right? 0 greater than 0, that's not going to happen. 0 is not a positive number. Okay, number 2 is false, so nothing else happens. Then we go down to number 5. Number 5 is return A. A is -10. I think we're done. This one is -10. Oops. Great. Okay, let's try it again. This time X is going to be 2 and Y is going to be -5. I feel okay just slotting those into here. Right? X is going to be 2, B is -5. Great. All right, so let's try our arrows again. Exclamation mark. Is positive 2. That's true. Ampersand, ampersand. Is positive -5. That's false. Okay. The not flips it. False and false. That's false. Great. Number 1 was false. I can go to number 3. Is positive A or not is positive B? Okay, so is positive 2, that's true, or not is positive -5, that's false. My not flips it, and I have true or true. Double check that cheat sheet. True or true, that's going to be true. Okay, number 3 is true. I get to do the code. Return random math B. Okay, B is -5. So let's look at the random math function. So this X is going to be -5. Return -5 times 5 divided by 2. -5 times 5, -25, divided by 2, -12.5. Am I done? Again, no, not quite. This is another trick here. Random math returns an integer. It's got to be a whole number. 12.5 is no good. We'll take -12. That's the correct answer here. And so, it returns -12 in random math. So return -12 for mystery function. So we print out -12. Whew. Okay. One more time. X is -2. Y is -1. So let's take a look here. -2 and -1. Let's erase what we did last time. Don't want to get too confused. Okay. not is positive a. Negative 2, not a positive number. So it's not false. And is positive negative 1, also false. Okay, the not's going to flip it. True and false. I double check my cheat sheet just to be sure, but true and false is false. Okay, number 1 was false. We can go down to number 3. Is positive a. Okay, so we have negative 2 is positive negative 2. That's going to be false. Here's my or lines, my exclamation mark. Is positive negative 1. That's going to be false again. False or flip it. So true. False or true. I double check my cheat sheet. That's true. Okay, we can run number 3, and it's random math B again. This time B is negative 1, so it's return negative 1 times 5 divided by 2. Negative 1 times 5 is negative 5. Divided by 2 gives me negative 2.5. But again, it's an integer, so it's just going to be negative 2. Great. Minus 2. Whew. Okay, that was a lot of work. I sure hope I didn't make any mistakes. In any case, you remember, take it slow. These kind of problems are tough. They're much longer, and there's plenty of things that are moving. So definitely, if you got this one wrong, don't beat yourself up too hard. It's definitely not easy. But hopefully this helped.